Hey, everybody. This is Alex Kehaya. I'm the host of the Index podcast. And as many of you guys have probably noticed who watch our YouTube channel, we've started doing sort of sub-segments on the show. We've got one called Everything SVM that is about the Solana virtual machine and everything that's happening in that space. We're sort of indexing the Solana space. And then we've got some scripted content where we kind of go down the funnel a little bit and teach you about specific products and projects and do things that are just me talking and showing some demos. Today, I'm super excited to announce Everything Bagel, which the name I love because the company that is supporting us and funding this work, part of the show, is called Bagel. And I've got their founder, Bidhan Roy, who is also now sponsoring the show and going to be my co-host here for this segment. And Everything Bagel is about a topic that I'm super passionate about that is highly relevant to the future of the internet. If you remember our why, it's people are worth knowing. We believe in telling the stories of the people building the future of the internet. Bidhan is one of those people, and they focus on AI. And they have this really successful blog that has a ton of people who come and read it every month. It's like 30,000 people a month. And it's about the bleeding edge of the technology and research that's going into AI. And we wanted to do a show that was about that. So we're going to have this series called Everything Bagel that's launching right now. This is the first episode where Bidhan just teaches me about what's happening on that blog and like at the future of the internet as it relates to AI. Today, we're going to start talking about Bagel at first. There's some really cool things that he taught me a few weeks ago when we were reviewing some of his deck, which is the deck that like explains what Bagel is doing. And I kind of wanted to share what I learned in that conversation with you all, which is sort of how this show got, the idea for this show got started. But before we jump into that, Bidhan, can you introduce yourself? Tell a little bit about your backstory and Bagel.
Yeah, happy to. Bidhan, my name, if you're wondering how to say it, and I'm the founder of Bagel. And my background is engineering. I've been doing it for more than a decade, mostly in machine learning and some in cryptography as well. I used to lead a team at Amazon Alexa, which was managing the machine learning infra of more than 100 million devices around the world. So one of the biggest in the world. And been at some other companies as well, and also been in the blockchain industry for a bit before starting Bagel. And how I came up with the idea on how to build what we're building today is that I have been personally been a machine learning developer and open source developer for a while. And I have been always thinking like how this open source revolution can be accelerated and how we can do that. One of the really good ways to do it is monetizing the open source contributions from developers. And that's basically at the core of what we do at Bagel as well. So Bagel is a fundamental primitive which makes open source AI monetizable using cryptography. Happy to go deeper into that, but yeah, we have been working on this for a while. I personally have been working on this problem for almost 5 years now and been working professionally, kind of technically, full-time with Bagel for last couple of years.
Awesome. Yeah, I think it's super important. And just to give people some context, I just had an interesting conversation with the CEO of Orchid Labs, which is a company that I used to work with, who's got a venture interest called Nazare, and they invest in AI. And he was talking about how, you can't just build like decentralized AI for the sake of Web3. And the value prop can't just be like, hey, you've got Google, Facebook, and Microsoft who control, and X, right? They control AI because of the economics and how hard it is to actually get things like physical infrastructure to train it. But it actually has to have some other like more tangible benefit for builders. And I think like Bagel is really important for those altruistic reasons that I was just talking about. It's something I care about a lot. It's like the centralization of AI and the restrictive, cost prohibitive access to the resources it takes to train AI is a big problem for the world, I think. And so you guys are building something that democratizes access to AI and creates an economy around the training and fine tuning specifically of AI. But let's talk about like where the rubber meets the road that actually makes this a benefit to engineers looking to leverage AI in their applications or looking to train models and fine tune them.
Yeah, definitely. I will kind of start with a bird's eye view to the problem, and then happy to go deeper into that. So one of the biggest things that happens today is that in AI, all the innovations are happening in the big companies, right? Like, yeah, the open source AI innovation is happening. The open source AI community is coming together to build things. But the biggest innovations are not coming from the open source community collaborating with each other. Like, even in open source AI, the best models always come from the big companies like Meta, the Googles, or the OpenAIs of the world. And there's a reason for that. Because the infrastructure that we have around open source AI does not incentivize these open source contributors to come together and basically put the resources and contribute to this open source community. And this is very prohibitive, especially for open source AI. It was always prohibitive for open source community in general, but as we go into the AI era of open source, it becomes a bigger of a problem because it just takes more resources to build things in AI. If you want to build a model in AI, you have to take out the training cost, you have to get the data cost and whatever that requires for the model to be really good at doing what it wants to be doing. And that's where we come in as Bagel. Like, we provide a primitive for the open source AI developers to monetize their contributions. And that kind of creates a cycle of value where the developers can contribute and they can monetize and they get some monetary value out of it. And they can get that monetary value and reinvest and make even better and better contribution. And that's how we kind of make open source AI the revolution it was always supposed to be. Right now, it's not there yet.
I love the vision. And I want to kind of get into the nitty gritty here of like how it actually works in a second. But can you talk about where you were like a year ago from a product standpoint, what you were doing and how that ties into where you are today?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, we always wanted to solve the monetization problem for open source AI. And the problem space, or the sub-problem space we started with initially was the data monetization. Like, we were like, hey, we can be Web3 where you can incentivize people to provide their data. And then that data can be used for different reasons, like training models and whatnot. And we were also creating this homogeneous layer on top of all the data, where we are converting all of this data into vector embeddings. So they're a type of format of data which kind of makes data homogeneous and easier to use and composable. So that was our thesis, and we started working with this, and we launched our product. And then we realized that on the data level of monetization, there are a lot of gray areas that needs to be figured out. For example, like if you provide a data, it might be not structured or it might be not cleaned, which needs to be done for that data to be utilized for machine learning training, right? And then those works are very resource intensive as well. Then the question became that where the value accrual happens, when the data is supplied or when the data is cleaned or when the data is structured. So the thesis at the moment was that, like, if someone just provides their proprietary data to the system, it will be really valuable. But turns out it's not. It's possible that someone actually get publicly available data and structure it in a really good way, and then all of a sudden that data becomes more valuable than the ones which is really proprietary information. So it's a really gray area where you have to figure out where the value accrual happens throughout the layers. And then we realized actually the best way to make contributions monetizable is to move up the stack and put the contribution on the model layer, where instead of like counting on like which data will be monetized and who gets how much of the monetization, we said like, how about you contribute to the model directly? And then like it can be some parameters to the model. And then in that way, if the parameters are being useful for the users or the benchmarks are getting higher, then all of a sudden you're like, yeah, I made a good contribution. And you can go and figure out where you get the data from and how you're going to clean it, how you're going to structure it and all of that. And all of a sudden, all of those ambiguity went away. So that's a little bit of product evolution that we had, where we moved up the monetization from the data piece to the model parameter piece.
Can you explain what parameters are for people like me who didn't know what they were for the first time we talked about this?
Yeah. Parameters are you can think of them as inputs to the model. So model is this program, and the same program behaves differently when we give it different inputs. So that's how the relationship between the model and parameter goes. So the same model can behave differently when the parameters are different. And that's what we basically do. Like when you take an open source model and you're kind of trying to train it in different ways, you're basically figuring out what set of parameters gives you the desired output. So that's what parameters are.
Can you give me an example, like concrete example, like with some data, like one parameter with one piece of data and what the impact is, like if you change it from version A to version B?
So for example, so parameters are also like, it's a lot of things. Like they're not just like parameters in a linear way. They're like matrices, like attention matrices and whatnot. But I'll give you an example where, let's say you have a base model, like the Llama base model, which is open source and everyone loves it. But out of the gate, it does not know about Index podcast or the Everything Bagel podcast. So what you're going to do is that you can fine tune that model in certain way where it knows about that. And how that happens is where you take all of this data from this Index podcast or the Everything Bagel podcast and put it into the model, and it creates its own set of parameters within the bigger set of model parameters. And those subset of parameters just contributes to the information of the Index podcast itself. So whenever you ask the model about something about us, those parameters get activated and they take over. And that's how it usually goes. Did that answer your question, Alex?
Yeah, it did. And so when we talked, I just didn't realize before we talked about this, like the way that worked, right? So these parameters kind of define how the model sort of takes the inputs, the data, and what happens with it when it gets trained. And so when you change those inputs, when you change the way that the model receives this data, it can change the outcome of how like it behaves.
Yeah, it totally. I mean, the model parameter change happens during the fine-tuning phase of things, but yeah, that's exactly how it works.
Yeah, and so you fine-tune it, right? You set the parameters and then you do the fine-tuning, right? And so what does the fine-tuning look like? Like how does that actually happen? What's the work a developer does to fine-tune a model?
So there are like thousands of ways to do fine-tuning, but fine-tuning is a work where you make a model hyper-specialized. Usually, you make a model hyper-specialized to certain domain. And that's usually because you want to use it for your own business use cases, or you want to use it for your own personal use cases. And the models you get out of the box in the open source community does not do that for this hyper-specialized works. So that's what fine-tuning is. And how it can be done? It can be done in thousands of ways. Like it can be done in you can do the fine-tuning on the whole model. But there is a very interesting area of fine-tuning, which is called parameter efficient fine-tuning, where we come in. That's what we specialize in at Bagel, where you fine-tune a subset of the parameters in a very efficient way, and that gives you the desired result without taking up huge amount of cost on that.
Yeah, so fine-tuning is basically teaching the AI how to use the data and give you like correct responses, right? It's like honing in those responses and making sure it's accurate.
Yes, that's one of the things that fine-tuning can do, for sure.
Okay. And so if you can do this in a very targeted way, you reduce the cost, which is a big benefit to a developer, and you probably accelerate the time it takes to get the expertise you want out of the AI, right? Like you're trying to teach it so that it's an expert at the specific thing for your business. Like, I don't know, looking at bone scans for a specific kind of cancer, right? Like that would be kind of an example. If you were using a large language or learning model that could do like image recognition. And so by making it really specific, it's more focused work over time.
Yeah, totally. And also sometimes you can also use fine tuning to change the behavior of the model itself. It's not about putting more data. You can change the whole behavior of the model. Like if you might want to reduce the hallucination that a model goes through. And there are fine tuning techniques you can use to do that. Or you can even make a model behave differently entirely. For example, it can be a regular model, but you want it to act as if it's a kind of test time reasoning model, like O1, for example. I'm sure you have used O1. So let's say if a model was behaving like GPT-4o, but you want it to behave like O1, you can do that through fine tuning as well.
That makes sense. And so the impact for developers, like faster, better, cheaper,
Customized
as well. And they can't get
Yeah.
that in other places, not at this level of granularity, it sounds like.
Yeah, true. I mean, they cannot get that at this level with granularity. That's one. And at Bagel, they also get the monetizability for the contribution they make. They also don't get that. That's actually the bigger piece here. Like I'm a developer, I can take any open source model that exists on the Bagel's platform and I can fine tune it and do my contribution. But at the same time, those contributions are monetizable. What that means is that if I made a model better,
yeah, go ahead, say it, yeah.
If I made a model better, and then that model generates revenue, I actually get attributed my fair share of the revenue, depending on how well my contributions were.
Yeah, so you're contributing parameters and feeding it data and doing this fine tuning, and then someone else comes along and like, oh man, that's really useful, and they may use it as is, and then they have to pay for that, just like they would pay for an API with OpenAI, right?
Correct.
This is something people are doing already out of the box. Like a developer comes, they don't want to just like actually train it; they just want to use the AI for whatever it is in their business. And then the other version of this that's really cool is somebody else might come along and see the work you've done and the API endpoints or whatever, the results they can get from using your version of the model. And they're like, I want to append that. I want to actually slightly fine tune it even more for another specific use case on top of what you did. And so they make a contribution and they start using it and they're probably paying for it. They're still compensating you. But also anyone else can now use their version and you still get your fair share depending on like how much you contributed versus what they contributed and all the other people before you contributed to it. So it becomes like this really interesting flywheel of an economy around fine tuning that in open source doesn't exist today. And we talked about this in the beginning, but the big side effect, the big benefit here is that all of that aggregate work, all of that investment of time and energy and money and capital and all this stuff, getting it to be stronger AI, be a much stronger, more useful AI, everyone gets access to in a democratized way. Versus like right now, all the stuff happening at Google and Azure and even at X, the billions of dollars they're spending on that is controlled by them. And again, the value prop isn't that, but I think it's an important thing to point out from a mission standpoint, because I think, I made the comparison the other day, but like AI and AGI, like it's kind of like almost like it feels like the nuclear arms race, right? Like the amount of power people are going to get from getting this stuff to market is going to be huge. And if there's not like a freely open, accessible version, it's not going to be good. So
Totally agreed. So that's actually what our end goal is, like empower the community to build these extremely advanced models. And how they will do it, they'll collaborate together to build and go towards the goal. And why we choose the fine-tuning flow instead of doing something else. Like there are lots of projects we're trying to do these massive decentralizedly massive models which are trained in a decentralized way. They're great. I love them. But for our approach, we took this path because while we believe that the permissionless collaboration is a big value add for the developers to adopt this, but we also have to meet them where they are. We cannot ask them to, like you are using this workflow, rip it off and adopt a totally new thing. And then you will get this benefit. That doesn't work. Mm-hmm. So what we did was we went in and saw that what the open source AI developers do today. And they actually take open source models, they fine tune it, make it better. And then someone else fine tunes it, they make it better. So we replicated the exact same workflow, but added this monetizability on top, which kind of incentivizes them to do so. And all of a sudden, this becomes exactly what they do. Very easy to adopt. They don't have to leave the workflow they already have, but they just get monetization on top directly. And that makes it way lower barrier for developers to come in, like maybe they're from Web 2 AI background, and adopt the solution we have built. And we are seeing a lot of success in that area as well.
Yeah, that's amazing. Can you talk a little bit about the community you've built? How many people are like using the tech and like forking your repos, reading your blog? Like, can you just talk about some of the stats here so people get an idea of like the impact you're having today?
Yeah, definitely. We're clearly on the earlier stages of our community development, but our reception within the open source AI community has been amazing. Like for obvious reasons, like we gave them a tool which replicates the exact workflow they follow, but they also get monetizability and all the benefits. And they love this idea. We have a research blog at the moment, which I think just crossed 40,000 subscribers. So
amazing.
Spreading like wildfire. People love what we talk about. We launched a product recently, which is called the bakery, because bakery is where the bagels are made. Which has the bagel primitive ingrained within it. So all the monetizability I talk about, it's already available within the bakery today. And we are getting a lot of reception. I'm not sure if I can share the exact numbers, but we're already making money out of it, and we just launched it a few weeks ago.
Amazing.
So that's spreading well, and we are really well received from the mainstream open source AI community. Like we are partnering with mainstream open source AI communities like Cerebral Valley, AI Breakfast, like they're very well known. And we are probably one of the first, or if not the first, like decentralized AI project who they partnered with. And that tells a lot about us. But I also think this is not just a win for us. This is a win for the whole decentralized AI community itself, because we are paving the way for the rest of the community to infiltrate this mainstream AI.
Yeah, and let's talk about community here, because this a little bit more. So this show is about open source AI, right? And I think our goal when we started talking about doing it was to spread ideas, to cross pollinate, and to include others in it. And you've got your research blog, which is about like the cutting edge of the research coming out of your team. Probably can feature other people as well. I'm not sure if you do that already, but I think the goal for the show is just to spread these ideas and talk about that. So on the next episode, we'll be talking about like some specific research topics that have come out on the blog. But what's your hope from the show, Everything Bagel show, and how we can get community members involved?
So my hope from the show is to spread the idea of monetizable open source AI. This is a movement that we have started, but we wanted to grow beyond us, and we wanted to spread like wildfire everywhere. And the more people believe in this, the more accelerated it would be, especially the more open source AI space, because then all of a sudden all these people can come together and collaborate with each other on the primitive that we have built. So that's my goal with this show. That's my goal with anything we do at the end of the day with our blog and everything.
I've got our why. Everything Bagel, accelerate open source AI.
Accelerate open source AI or make open source AI monetizable. I think that's a better one for us, like more specific to us. Yeah, and how people can collaborate with us. Like you guys can find us on Twitter, join our Discord, ping us. If you're an AI developer who wants to leverage the infrastructure that we're building, we are happy to collaborate with you. If you're a researcher and you want to collaborate on the research, we're happy to collaborate with you. We believe in open source, so everything we do, all the research are also open sourced. So we open it up for the rest of the community. So all of your work will be used for the benefit, not just the open source community, but humanity in general.
Yeah, and if you want to come on the show and talk about it, we'd love to have you here too. So, you can find me at AF Kehaya on Twitter. And maybe how can people contact you guys? Is there like an email or a Twitter that they can DM? My DMs are open, but is there a way that people can reach out to you to try to get involved?
Yeah, my DMs are open as well. My Twitter is Bidhan XYZ. So my first name, Bidhan, and then XYZ. So you can find me there. That's also my Telegram handle, actually. So if you are on Telegram, you can find me there. And my email is bidhan@bagel.net.
Awesome. Well, everybody who tuned in, thanks for listening. And if you're a researcher out there, please hit us up. We'd love to get you on the show, have you contribute to the blog or just contribute to open source software in general, open source AI. Thanks for being on, Bidhan, and thanks for supporting getting this Everything Bagel segment going. I'm very excited about it.
Likewise, I'm very excited about it as well. And together we'll take open source to the state where it needs to be.
Let's go.